Okay, welcome to our current session, number 36, I believe. And we're only going to have 40 altogether because there's an awful lot on the star calendar. And I've got a little plan here to finish it up in 5 more meetings counting tonight. So we're starting on slide 332. Excuse me. The star calendar year differs slightly from a solar year. Wait a minute, let me. The stars rising on the spring equinox changed by 1 degree in 72 years. Now this is called the precession of the equinoxes. And usually they just say it's the spring equinox, as it says on this slide. So that's very slow. It was a big deal in Egypt when it was discovered. Most people, Egyptologists, don't believe that they had that ability, but there's a lot of evidence that they did. Certainly the Greeks knew about it. Hipparchus noticed that the star maps were shifting. So, but only shifting by 1 degree in 72 years. And, you know, that's not very much. The width of the sun or the moon in the sky is ½ a degree. So they shift by the moon width in 36 years. Noticeable if you're a careful observer. And one funny thing about modern star maps is they're hooked to the Earth. And so they have to remake all of the star maps about every 50 years, which to me is sort of silly. But it's because our telescopes are hooked to the Earth, and therefore it makes it easy to use telescopes. But it's hard on, well, I guess it keeps map makers in business. But anyway, if you look at the scale on this, that scale is on the ecliptic, which, as you know, is the path of the sun, apparent path of the sun through the stars. So this is telling you, if you look up between the bull's horns, it says minus 4,000. That means 4,000 BC. Well, technically, that means 4001 BC. There's a year difference between the negative and the BC. But the point is, at that time, 4000 BC, when you looked at the sunrise on the spring equinox, March 21st, on our calendar, it's good back then, if you could see the stars around the sun, you would see it's between the horns of the bull. By the way, if you look at Egyptian pictures, they have a lot of pictures of bulls with the sun disk right between the horns of the bull. I believe that is talking about this very phenomenon. The sun is between the horns of the bull. By 3000 BC, it's up by the star Aldebaran in the eye of the bull, the seer. By 2000, it takes about 2,000 years to go through a constellation. So by 2000 BC, it's up starting to go into the ram. So the first was the age of Taurus, the next is the age of Aries, and that goes from 2000 to very close to right when Christ is born. The dividing line on the 0 is right down that line of the band of the fishes, or the edge of the net, if you think of that as a net. Those two cords tying the fishes to the back of the sea monster, which is not shown, can also be thought of the 2 edges of a net that the ram is casting out to sea. Anyway, the 0 is right there before Christ is born. I mean, he's born in the year 0 on April 6th, which is 1 BC, and it started on March 21st, 1 BC. So he starts the age of Pisces. The age of Pisces goes up, and you can see the fish as it goes up past 2000. So we're still in the age of Pisces. If you look at the fish on the right, 2000. But Aquarius starts, if you look down at the bottom, Aquarius The very edge of Aquarius is also in 2000. So we've already started the age of Aquarius, and if you follow the dot up there to above, you'll see it's around 1800 BC, and I believe it's exactly 1836 BC, right at the time when Jesus appeared in the Kirtland Temple and said that now that this is the beginning of the pouring out of blessings onto the heads of the saints. And the constellation of Aquarius is a man pouring out water onto the heads of the fish, which represents that. That's a long time. Boy, if we're cutting down the class, that was a long time on this slide. But most people think of this precession of the equinoxes as just of spring, and they talk about, well, it's 26,000 years to go all the way around. But what I understood is, I'm echoing now.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, good. Somebody, yes, I thought somebody had, okay, thanks. We're going to skip the other slides, but instead of thinking of one big cycle of 26,000 years, you can think of it as 4 cycles of each of about 7,000 years of the history of the Earth. See, this goes from minus 4,000 up to nearly plus 3,000, and if I extended it, it does go to 3,000, so it's all 7,000 years. Well, you can do the same picture for the summer solstice, for the fall equinox, and the winter. And, oh, it looks like I'm going to show those pictures. I've got the little outline. Let's go, I'm going to slide 333 now. Let's still talk about the spring. So when Passover, the Hebrew Passover on 15 Nisan, is on a Sunday, then Easter is on the following Sunday. Easter is always the Sunday after Passover. If Passover is on a Saturday, then Easter is the very next day. That's what happened when Jesus was crucified. Passover was on Saturday when he went to the spirit world, and he resurrected the next day. But if Passover falls on a Sunday, it's a whole week later. That's how it always is on the star calendar. Passover, in this case, is on 15 Aries during the age of Christ. And that's the equivalent of Passover because it's on the 15th day of the month. Like Passover is the 15th of Nisan. So Passover is always on the Sunday, and so Easter is always a full week after on the 22nd. So this shows 3 holy days. The New Year's Day, which is 1 Aries, is in the star in the paw of the ram, or paw or hoof, whatever, hoof I guess they have. And the 15th, Passover is in the shofar, the horn of the ram, and Easter is the bright star, the brightest star in the ram. And the name of that star I call it the risen ram because it represents, in any age, it actually represents Easter. So that's how it is during these years. Now, slide 334, these are the southern constellations of the sea. We already looked at the northern. And this is the underworld where I told you the evil things are. So here we see a big sea serpent. We see the river of fire. We see the sea monster, which is the great and abominable church. And this ship that's closest to the perdition is the ship with, this is Argos, that has a lot of men on it that are trying to find the golden fleece to get a good resurrection because they have not done well on their test in life. So here look, evil monsters. Oh, and this hole, there are no constellations of the original ones there because that is invisible up in the north. And by the size diameter of this hole and the location, both the location and the diameter, you can tell when the constellations were formed and about what latitude. And it was about the latitude of Missouri, about the time of Enoch, 3000 and something BC. Is when the constellations were written down according to that calculation. Okay, slide 335. The zodiac represents, oh yeah, this is really important. This is huge. That's why I'm putting it in the classes that we have to have. The zodiac represents roles of Christ. And they're done in sets of 4. And they're 4 related. This is a great example. One of them is king. The lion is the king. He's the king of beasts. He's the king. We in our country don't have a king, as far as we know. We are supposed to have 3 branches of government that a king does. So the big arrow goes to king because he's 3 in 1. But if you separate them out, there's a judicial branch on a judge, which is the scorpion, is the judge. The lawgiver, the man pouring out knowledge, is one of them. And the bull, which is the general, he's the army guy. This is the Lord of hosts. So Christ, so all 12 of these are going to be roles of Christ, but one of them is the king. He's the judge, the lawgiver, and the Lord of hosts. And they're in a set of 4. Now we can just rotate that arrow around, and here's another set of 4. The Messiah is the symbolism of the seed, the promised seed that will come. And it's also, she's a nurturing. Anyway, it's the nurturing side of Messiah when he says, I would gather you as my chickens. Anyway, the Messiah is the big one. And there's 3 main roles to the Messiah. He's the Savior. And he saves us. See, that's nurturing. See, it's like the herdsman that fights off the wolves. By the way, the herdsman's the main male version of her. The good shepherd, in other words. So there's the Savior, there's the high priest, which is one of the roles. Notice the high priest is here, not under the government. And he's the Son of God. This is where he's the witness. He says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So he's the faithful witness. And those are the archer and the fishes and the twins. If we go to slide 337 and rotate the arrow one more time, another big role of the Savior is the Redeemer. And this is shown by the scales. And the scales in the old pictures always show one scale below the other. By the way, here's the judge. See, the judge is holding the scales in his left hand. That's always, all the good statues have it in the left hand. And the lower scale represents Christ. That's the brighter star in the scale. And then the name of that star is Redeemer. But this is where Christ pays the price for us. And to redeem, these words all have meanings. We use them all. He's the Redeemer, and Israel and the rock, and he's the Savior. We use all of these words, but they all have different meanings. Redeemer means to get something out of hock. You put something in the pawn shop, and you go pay the price to get it out. Or if somebody's in prison, you pay their bail. This is more like a bail. Get them out of prison. So he pays our bail. That's why it's a scale. He pays the bail to get us out of the spirit prison. So he's the Redeemer. He's also the sacrifice. He has to pay a sacrifice, and that's the goat, which is sacrificed. And notice it's the goat and not the sheep. The reason for that is goats are evil. When Christ was sacrificed, he was judged as being evil. I mean, they let the murderer guy go, and they crucified him because he was tried and convicted. So the goat, it represents something that looks like evil. If you go through the atonement, they have two goats and they look identical. And when Jesus was judged, he was there with Barabbas, and Barabbas means the son of the Father. Anyway, there were two goats. That whole ceremony is about him being crucified. The ram, well, I got to go fast. We might be shorter on question time here, because this is all important stuff. The ram is, in fact, the resurrection, so Christ resurrects. And the deliverer is another one of these words that's related to redeemer and sacrifice. A deliverer is somebody who delivers you. And the crab can deliver things out of the ocean and which represents the underworld, the spirit prison, and he can deliver them up onto the beach. The land, which represents being out of spirit prison. So the crab, especially the fiddler crab, the real one ought to have the giant right arm, because he says, I have the big right arm, which is not weakened. So the crab is a deliverer. So he physically takes people from it. Moses was a deliverer who took them out of Egypt and marched across the desert and delivers them to the promised, well, he almost got to the promised land. Joshua did the last little bit. Anyway, so you see how the names of the jobs are important, and they're all related. Okay, let's keep rolling along here. Christ resurrected on Easter, which was the day of the ram. The star that's called, here I just say ram, but I've changed, it's risen ram, but you have room for both names. The brightest star in Aries on the day of Easter 22 Aries. And in the myths, the golden fleece represented the resurrection. Slide 339. Oh yes, so 1 week, exactly 1 week. See, 1 week before the Easter is the Passover on the star calendar, which is 15, 7 days before 22 on Aries. That was the day Mary anointed, Sunday morning, Mary anointed, or Saturday afternoon, it's the same. I think it was Saturday evening at the meal. She anoints, Saturday evening, she anoints Jesus' feet and he says she's doing this in preparation for my burial. And the name of the star there is Anointed. And it was also Passover on another calendar. Slide 340 is Moses raised the tabernacle. There's a big deal of this tabernacle, which is like a temple, which is like a body. Out in the desert, they made a big deal of the day, well, the one at the bottom I'll read first. A week earlier, the Holy Tabernacle had been anointed. Also, Aaron had been anointed, but they anointed the tabernacle. You read that if you don't, you miss that if you don't read carefully. I missed it for years. I was shocked at what? They anointed, I thought he was being anointed as the priest. They anointed the tabernacle. That's like Jesus was anointed on this same day. On Passover, and then 7 days later, which was New Year's on one of the calendars. I don't say that here. It gets confusing. On the Hebrew calendar, it was New Year's Day. But that's when the tabernacle was raised, and it was Easter Sunday on the star calendar. And it was Easter Sunday on the priest calendar. So just lots of great symbolism here. All right, now here's one more star that points out things on the precession of the equinoxes. The birth of Joseph was on Sunday, the 6th of April, and it was Passover. Now we're looking at Passover instead of Easter. And so way back 1800 BC, see, look at the stars here, even though it's 1800 BC, that's when the day 1 is here, but the sun's going this way, the day 15 is way up here. This star is the Passover star in that age. And he's born on Passover in that age. But in the time of Christ, when Mary anoints the Savior for his burial, the star is, this is Passover. And so the Passover star changes through the ages. Now, I may not say much more about that. That's fairly complicated. But there's different kinds of holy days on the star calendar. Some are associated with the star. Anytime, whatever time of whatever year, that if you're on the day of this bright star, that's a major holy day. And so is the star in the bright one in the ram, is a major holy day through all ages. But in the age of Christ, that's also Easter. In the age of Christ, this one, Easter is 7 days beyond this, and I think it's 7 days isn't that far. It's some star in here that's along about that place. So the point is, there are seasonal holy days like Passover and Easter that are in the spring. And in this age, this star is rising in the spring, so it fits Passover. And in the age before of Taurus, Taurus is rising in the spring. So on the star calendar, the Passover day and the seasonal feast days are actually tied to the stars and the seasons. I believe that's all we're going to say about that. I am now going to skip to slide 349. Oh, wait. Yeah, 349. And this will be, I think, our last start for tonight. So we are going to be, I'm actually going to be on schedule. Good. For 25 minutes. This is an example that some stars are in two different constellations of the same star. And a good example of this is Fomalhaut, which is one of the four cornerstone stars. This is the one, when we saw the four corner stars of last week, this is the one that represents Noah. And it's down here, you see the name Fomalhaut. Al means the, Haut is fish, I think, and Foam is head. Oh no, Haut is head. So this is, it's probably Al, Foam, Al, Haut. In Arabic, you say, the fish, the head. Anyway, it's the head of the fish. Is what was. You don't need that, but that's what the Arab. Most of these star names are Arabic, and I give it two different names because it is in the constellation of Aquarius. That's one of the four cornerstone constellations, and it's the end of the stream, and that's on the 21st day of Aquarius. And that I give it the name blessings because these are blessings being poured out on the head of the fish, as it says in section 110. That Aquarius pours out the blessings onto the heads of the. This fish, by the way, is down in paradise. This is under the ecliptic, and Noah is actually. It's going to turn out to be over paradise when he dies. I believe he becomes the head man in paradise. Before him, Abel was over the whole spirit prison, but paradise is the highest part where the good guys are. In the spirit prison, anyway, that's a complicated. There's 3 levels to the spirit prison. The next day, 22nd, that's the more holy day. That's the 22nd is the one that's like Easter, anyway, it's a little more holy. And it's actually in the head of the fish. And that's the standard thing. The official name of it is, the Fomalhaut is in the head of the fish. You have to read the old texts to find out that it was considered to be in both constellations. even ancient astronomers didn't like that, and modern ones can't stand it. They don't have any stars in two constellations, even though it's obvious that they are. They divide it and make it in one or the other. But this one is so important. It actually, I believe, gets 2 days. One of the big clues that it gets 2 days is the death date of Noah is on the 21st of Aquarius. And often some of these big prophets die on their star day, or are born on their star day. So it looks like it's the 21st, it's his star day that goes with Aquarius, either with the man. But anyway, it gets 2 days. Oh, I've got it here. Noah died on his star day 21, and Deuteronomy was given like knowledge water on 22. So I call this star, my English name for this star is knowledge. Because, in fact, that's what it says in section before 121. It says, I will pour out knowledge onto the heads of the saints. So it's blessings or knowledge. And see, knowledge has to do with the head. That's why it's knowledge. The bright star in the bull and the eye is the seer. So the 4 bright stars have to do with different parts of the body and different emotions or skills. Okay. We're actually pretty close to on time. That's where we're going to stop today. So we did not show those other slides, but just know that just the precession, there's a precession of both of the solstices and both of the equinoxes. And I believe they're almost equally important. Oh, I'm getting a notice that the meeting now has unlimited messages. So I'm going to thank Zoom for that. Unlimited minutes. But we're not going to go over, we'll go up to the 45 and stop like usual. But okay, I am going to, there was one question asked on an email that I did not answer. I will answer that first. It was about the eclipse coming up in 2024. You know, we had one in 2017. And I was asked if that was important. First of all, my disclaimer is I don't really do eclipses or any real phenomena in the sky like a conjunction. Does this mean this or that? All my work is on star calendars, which are approximations to where the stars are and where the planets are. And I don't even have any eclipse days on the calendar. Every full moon, every new would be a lunar eclipse, and every moon would be a solar eclipse. And I don't have eclipses. Given that I don't study this, somebody who has looked at it sent me an email. And I think the eclipses are important. It's just that I'm not an expert on them. And if you look at the path of where the last one went on August 21st, 2017, Monday, and you compare it to where the one in 2024 goes, it is really interesting because I believe the place they cross is somewhere near Independence, as I recall, Missouri, but the one coming down in 2024, it comes down, I think it's right through Kirtland, Ohio. So these eclipses are going through the shadow, which is a very narrow, usually about 30 miles across, 30 to maybe 70, very narrow totality, seem to be going through interesting places. And as I recall, besides Kirtland, it's somewhere up in New York around the beginning of the church. I don't have the map in front of me. But it's got to be important. That's out of my scope of expertise, so that's all I can say is it's interesting to look at the paths. I have decided that eclipses are important where they're visible. And a lot of the scurry, I'll say hype about the tetra full eclipses of the lunar eclipses made a big deal about Jerusalem, and this is Jerusalem. And I think 3 of the 4 were not visible in Jerusalem. And if they're not visible there, I don't think they're about there, because they wouldn't see it. And they, they don't see it. That to me is sort of, it's obvious. The one in the 2017, it crossed the entire United States. I think it was the only one in a long, long time that has only been visible totality in the United States and went all the way across. That's rare. So that one looks like a warning to the United States. And they are usually omens of, the lights going out. That's not a good omen. Light is good, dark is bad. That's about all I can say on that. I'm open if anybody else wants to respond to that or they've studied it. Otherwise, I'm going to open it. I think all of your microphones are on. And I can look, I can click on the, let me see if I'm smart. I don't even see it. Start video, mute, share. Where I don't see the button for, I got it open, the chat. Okay, I'm looking at the chat and I don't see any questions there. So your mics are all on. Are there any questions?
What's interesting on that eclipse that it passed through several cities named a lot of the states have a city, Salem, and it's eclipse.
Yeah, your audio to me is a little fuzzy. Do you remember? I remember the places it went through were important. One was up in Rexburg. I mean, it goes across there, but I don't remember. It goes from Portland to South Carolina. I mean, it went all the way across, but I don't remember. It just seems like it went right through somewhere near Independence, and the other one does too. And so the fact that they're 7 years apart and cross.
Yeah, cross right there.
Is really interesting. But any questions on this or the stars? I can tell you on the star calendar, we will have one whole session, and it might be next week, on exactly how the stars are chosen to be the 364. There were 10 rules that were discovered that govern how to select the stars. Anyway, so we don't have to ask that now, because that will be, and I said it briefly last week, but we're going to spend a whole session on that. So are there other questions on any subject that I have written about? I might comment. I think last week I commented on the Jacob's Ladder article. I'll just say again, that to me is going to be really important. I don't prove in there that these different calendars that have 7 or 10 steps are the same as Jacob's Ladder, but when you look at it, and I haven't the knowledge to compare them to those names like principalities and powers and those fancy names that I don't know really anything about. But it really looks like there is going to be a relationship, and that each of the 7 angels are actually on 7 rungs. And so that the 7 angels are not necessarily the top angels. In fact, they're almost for sure not the top angels. but there are 7 angels on different rungs. So using those other words, it'd be one that's principality and one of power and whatever those words are. They'd be different, and that's how it appears right now. Though this is a learning in process. But the point on that paper is it ties several calendars together, and the holy days from almost all of the calendars going together and pointing to these things which we haven't known much about. I can comment also, I wrote a paper on the sealed Book of Mormon. The thrust of that paper was strictly on what's contained in the book. There's all kinds of controversy about how it was produced and the witnesses, and there's just all kinds of other stuff. And I did not comment on any of that. And it reminded me very much of the Book of Mormon, where they attack everything. Most of the attacks on that book were not about the contents, but about the people, the witnesses. This is a fraud. He's a gold digger. They attack the man ad hominem. If you actually just look at the Book of Mormon, I don't see problems with it. So that was the thrust of my paper. And it was also in response, Denver's last comment on it after he had read it was that if we read it, we ought to consider 5 questions that were things like, is there really much new here? Was this worth keeping from people until this day? And when I wrote that paper, I just responded to those 5 questions. And basically, it's a positive paper saying, yeah, I think there's new things here, and it looks good to me. I don't have a testimony that I know it's true or anything, but I answered the questions that to me it looks good. Oh, and I will reiterate, here's something. Reiterate something Denver said in his he's got a 3-part post, I think, on how to study better. And the very first thing he says, as I recall, at the very front of the first one, is one of the best things we can do is try to forget everything you know, and don't think you know more than we all think we know more than we do. That's why we study. That's why we learn. We go to school. We get a degree. And we come out of it thinking we know things because we're able to repeat and get answers on the test. And we can recite the 13 Articles of Faith and quote the scriptures. So we think we know all of these things. And Joseph Smith's biggest problem, one of the biggest, he said, was he tries to really teach them something new, and they shattered like glass because they're so stuck in what they've learned. I will suggest that we are too, and I mean all of us, yea, everyone. We all have things we think we know and understand. And I did, on my first reading of the sealed book, I was going to reject it because of my pet theories on the meaning of the olive tree allegory. And they were just theories, but they're theories I've held for 20 years. I will share something else with you. This was a teaching of my brother, who was my mentor. And he taught me this, and I never believed it, and I still struggle with it. But it's very much what Denver was saying. And my brother taught me, he said, when you don't know something, don't even put a placeholder in. Don't say, well, this is my tentative theory, but of course I will happily discard it when I get new light and knowledge. And when I said, well, why not? That's what science is. Science is you put in theories, and if you get disproven, then you replace them. And so, I've been taught all my life to have the best theory you've got. That was totally opposed to everything I've learned. And he said, the problem is you'll forget that it's a theory. And when the true light comes, you won't be able to let go of it. That is so true in science. They start out talking about atomic theory. If you look in books now, I don't think you'll see the words atomic theory. They'll say, this is a picture of the atom. It has protons and electrons in it. I will just tell you, I, John Pratt, personally, PhD in astronomy and physics, I don't believe atoms have electrons and protons in them. Okay? I mean, that was a theory, and it was nice. But if you believe it for long enough, it comes out a law. We do that in religion. I was ready to reject this whole book of the sealed book because it disagreed with my theory of where the three branches were planted. And I was forced to look at that, because either I'm going to reject the book because of that or not. That was the main problem I saw with it. And when I looked hard at my theory was no good. I mean, my theory is out. I don't care if this is a true book or false book. My theory was shattered because I actually stopped and thought about it. I destroyed my own theory. The theory, let's call it a theory, in the sealed book matches perfectly. And right now, that's my that's my working model, because I just can't leave things completely blank. My brother, maybe he could. I have not succeeded at that. But I do know people, other people, who have totally rejected this book because, not because it interferes with Scripture, but interferes with their theories of what happened. And so I'm not saying I know the book is true or not. And that's not the point. The point is, listen to Denver when he said, don't clutch your theories forever, and recognize what's fact and what's theory. And I'll tell you one more thing here. When I taught astronomy at Utah Valley University, UVU, I taught them on the first day of my astronomy class. And I said, in everything in science, if you can, when you're studying and learning, and I said, this will be so hard that the book is not going to help you. Nobody's going to help you. You're going to have to actually think by yourself. When you're taking notes, try drawing a line down the center of your note page. On the left side, you put facts. And facts means observations. That's what it means only. In other words, when we split an atom, we see electrons come out and we see protons come out. That's a fact. That's observed. And there's also neutrons. Then on the right side, you put your theory. And the theory can be, there are electrons and protons inside of an atom. Duh. The problem with that is when they kept getting higher and higher voltages and power to break them, out come muons and pions and neutrinos. But they don't believe that all of those things are inside an atom. They say, oh, those were created by the impact. Well, the theory I believe in is the electrons and protons were also created by the impact. I'm just giving that as an example. One is a hard observation, the other is a theory. And boy, it's hard to do, and scientists don't do this. They will refer to their little pet theories like facts. You read a science book, they're interchangeable. So anyway, it's tough to separate observations, repeatable observations, which is the heart of science, with theories and the whole scientific method. Final words, and then we'll close. Final word on the scientific method is that what the method is you make observations, hopefully repeatable. You know, like you can do it over and over. The sun comes up every morning, that kind of thing. And but the theory, your theory, you come up with a theory to explain it. The theory is never proven true, ever, because there's always a chance that a new observation will disprove it. So when a new observation comes along that disproves your theory, you got to do one or two things if you're honest and have integrity. You either throw out the old theory and you either throw it out and make a new one, or you modify the old one to explain the new data, or you throw out the data and say, that was a bad observation. And sometimes that's true. Machines and, some observations are bad. But you need to handle it. So bottom line is, in science, it's called falsification. Any theory can be falsified, especially by a repeatable observation that's not predicted by it. You can prove them false. You can never prove them true. So always be open to have your little theories proven false when new data comes along. And with that, I will close. And next week, there's no meeting next week, so it'll be 2 Sunday nights from now when we have the next session. So thank you all, and good night.
Thank you, John.